I don't know how to get rid of it, but I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
So, have you sent the link? I'll go to my tablet and see if I can get on there.
I'm trying to find the latest email because several people are new. So, and then we have all these other ones from
Tam.
Sam that I can't copy and paste. I can't just forward because
Well, hers, yeah, I can't get on with
I'm
hers.
sending it to you,
Oh,
Naja.
and that's how I got on, was from hers.
yeah, I didn't have any problem, but Naja's saying she did.
Yeah, I sent it to you. I don't know if it'll help.
Okay, thanks, Ruth.
Welcome.
And Laura, can you see that there's a blue button on that box?
Oh, no. I just
Yeah.
see, and I just pressed my escape button down. Now I don't know what I'm looking at.
Well, we can still see you.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm not gonna fiddle. No, I know that if Jaws was on talking to me, I could, but I don't want to put him on now. He could tell me how to get rid of it, but I think it's okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah, Ruth, it came on.
I don't have to see your faces. I know you're all gorgeous.
You're
Thank you.
just saying that.
So I've never logged on my phone before. It did come up and I'm ready to come in on my tablet, but I don't know how to get out of my phone.
I will remove you.
I can remove you.
I'll
if you
remove
get
you.
it.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
And she's been removed.
And she-
Oh,
Hopefully the other link will work. Okay, let me get to the. I'm in my sense. There's
I
not.
think each computer has its own personality, even if it's not supposed to. It's funny.
Yeah, I think you're right.
There's not.
There she is.
Yes. And there's Tam.
Okay, so it looks like nobody else had any problem with the other link. I'm guessing. Did anybody have a problem with the link?
Thanks.
No, there were so many of them, even one from last month.
They're all the same.
Ah, good.
Although
That's
I
excellent.
I just tried one from 2023. I have it in my Zoom folder, and it said that it's obviously a different one. So I was glad.
Yeah, everything from this year is the same.
Okay, I'll get rid of that one.
I'm surprised there's a different one in 2023. Anyhow, let's just go around and do a very quick check-in and just let Marcia know why we're interested in Better Exit. And so she can have an idea of why we're here. And I'll start because I am very interested in Better Exit because both my parents had dementia and I have one of the genes and my memory is really bad, even though I got tested, a neuropsych test for 3 hours that says I'm just average. So I don't think average is very high, but I guess they think it's average. So I'm concerned and I don't want to have to fly to Switzerland. My name's Lisa Detmer and I'm just going to call on people. D.
Okay, here I am. I'm in out of Fort Collins, Colorado, and I've always been interested in the aspects of death, and I'm here to be supportive of others. Not a lot going on in my life that's immediate. I do have a slow-moving CLL leukemia. Lisa, pick on somebody.
Okay, Meryl.
Okay. Oh, good. Oh, good. I had a hard time getting that arrow on the mute to unmute, but
We
it's
can hear
unmuted,
you.
I see. So
We can
that's
hear you.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here in rural Middle Tennessee, and I'm interested in Final Exit because I don't know what it is, and it sounds interesting.
Let me
And,
just clarify. Let me clarify, Meryl and everybody else. Better Exit advocates to expand the definition, and Marcia, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm just winging this, of how to get medical euthanasia, I'm going to call it,
Yeah,
so that it includes people who are not terminal within 6 months.
yeah, I'll
is
go
it-
with that. I think that death and dying is a normal, natural part of life and living, which happens after birth and developing. And I've already done the first one and a lot of the second, and I'm interested in doing the third.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jan.
Well, I'm in the Bay Area, and I haven't been for a while. My niece died of a drug overdose, and I found it was very hard. And I'm a week away from knee replacement surgery. So even though I'm here today, I probably won't be back for at least a month. And I'm interested in this topic and always have been, but I've been more interested because of all the pain I'm in and thinking, my mom had this terrible pain syndrome, and I'm at this moment a week away from surgery, feeling anxious I'm going to end up with it because it comes either from an injury or surgery. And so this idea appeals to me because if there's too much pain, I might want to take a better exit. Thank you.
Great. And I'll just read what it says on Better Exit's mission statement: to broaden California's end-of-life options so that individuals struggling with irredeemable suffering have the right to a peaceful death through medical aid in dying. Just so I don't give people mistaken information. Ruth?
Hi, I'm Ruth. I'm in Southern California in Palm Springs, and I'm very interested in this whole subject of death and dying. I facilitate a death cafe online every month. And I think that people that are able to choose the way and time of death are just blessed. I think it's just a wonderful thing to be able to do that. And when not all of us will have that option, but I like to learn about other options. And I am very interested in the laws in California since I live in California and used to be a healthcare professional, but I'm not anymore. Thank you. And I'm very much interested in the laws changing in California.
Thank you. For Val and Tam, we're just doing a very quick introduction to let Marcia know why we're interested in Better Exit. So, Sue.
Yes, I will be facilitating a open house on death and dying for all of National Oloc. They wanted it to be an open house and just facilitated where everybody could talk. And of course, I've lost my calendar. I can't remember the exact date in September. It's in September, and you are all invited. And in preparation for that, Marcia, I had updated a resource agencies list I already had for death and dying from 3 years ago for something or other I did on death and dying. Then I should say I'm a retired nurse. And ever since I turned 80, I've been very interested in death and dying because also I'm an atheist. And that has severe implications for one's approach to death, I feel. And so I have your agency, Better Exit, on my list only because in part you are trying to help everybody, not just in California, to have a better exit, even though you might have Alzheimer's. That's what I was told. Now, let's see, when am I going to have this open house? I think it's pretty much at the beginning of September. Isn't that awful? I can't find the date. I can't find the date of my own Zoom. Anyway, I hate to say it. I hope everybody else knows it better than me. Oh, here it is. It's Monday, September 16th at 4:30. Now that is not a Monday that we're going to have death and dying. This is for the open house for National Oloc. And you can, I assume all of you get the National Oloc information announcements from the planning committee, and you just register there for the open house. And so thank you, Marcia, for being here. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
And Sue, if you can also send information to this group about it, that would be helpful, and I'll share it with other people who are not in Oloc.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, because the open houses are open to anybody who is not an affiliate of Oloc. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Damn.
Laura.
Laura, Jan, by the way, it's so lovely to hear your voice again. I missed you.
Thank you.
This is Laura Bach from Mill Valley, exiled from San Francisco. I am here because I want as many choices as I possibly can. Some may fit, some may not, but and I wouldn't miss this group anyway. So here I am. Lisa?
Thank you. Val?
Yes, hi, I'm Val Cantor in California, and I am interested in death and dying. I'm very, very healthy for an 82-year-old. And I know that I have a tremendous aversion to the medical industry and to pharmaceuticals, and I haven't even had an aspirin in 40 years. I do my own doctoring of myself with homeopathy, and I will never let, if possible, the medical establishment touch me. So I'm interested in having a good death, and that includes avoiding any attempt to ever resuscitate me, avoiding pain, if it ever comes, whenever it comes my way. And so I'm thrilled to be part of Death and Dying, and to hear No Exit's take on how to have a better exit. Thank you.
It's better exit, but thank you. But no exit was.
That's right. We had no exit. Okay. Well, want to hear about exiting.
Okay. And let's see, Tam.
I'm Tam in Oakland, California, and I've been interested in death and dying for a long time. I'd be interested in hearing about your group and how, what's the mechanism? And I'm really interested in not being in pain. So that's a priority for me. And what was the other thing? I'm sure you don't do politics as a group, but when this whole subject comes up, I'm just curious if there's any discussion about, I mean, we're all white, middle class for the most part, women here, and other, groups do not have the access to care that we do. And so, and especially the disability community, which I am in. And so I'm curious, what kind of safeguards there are with your group. Thank you for being here.
Okay, I think, is Naj, are you the only person that hasn't gone?
I think
Did
so.
Meryl go?
Yes.
Well, I'm Naj McFadden. I'm in Indiana. I've been a chronic pain patient since I was 12. And I recently had an MRI, and my spinal column is now being pinched from inside the spinal column. And I don't know if there's really anything to do about that. Certainly nothing that I'm interested in. And I think that's great that you're going to try and include Alzheimer's in the reason for people to be able to choose their own death. But I would also encourage you, Marcia, to include chronic pain, because I
It's
cared
not-
for my mother who died with Alzheimer's at home, and she was really happy. I mean, I was able to keep her very happy. So, but being in chronic pain, there's nothing that keeps you happy.
So just to
Thank you.
clarify, I said I was interested in Alzheimer's, but they're on their website, it says so that individuals struggling with irredeemable suffering have the right to a peaceful death through medical aid in dying. So just want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Meryl, did you want to ask a question? Because I want.
Yes,
have
I
time.
wanted to ask, and you may be covering this anyway, but I'm interested in knowing if this is something that you're thinking about legislating, or if it's just for personal information, and if it is going to be legislated, how can those of us in states outside of California get on your bandwagon there?
So I just want to, I think that's what Marcia's going to talk about. So
Great, thanks.
let's give Marcia some time now. Marcia, I'm going to see if I can figure out how to spotlight you, or but until then I'll just let you go ahead and
Okay.
talk.
Okay.
We go till
You can
for an
pick
hour and
me.
a half, so we have quite a bit of time.
So you end at 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introductions. It's always really helpful to know who I'm talking to. I'm going to leave some time at the end for Q&A because you'll probably have questions or comments, and that's always a useful part of these presentations. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got into this and how a better exit got started. I don't think you can probably see this photo. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Can you see that? Okay, that was my husband. He and I were both retired psychologists. I had an earlier career as a professional dancer. He was a brilliant guy, a big reader, an amateur musician. He had always told me that if he ever developed dementia, he would not allow that disease to run its course. His mom died of severe dementia. We assumed it was Alzheimer's, but we really didn't know. She was actually in Argentina, not the States. She ended her life without language, really not knowing who she was or who anybody else was. It wasn't any kind of a life that he ever wanted. So, by the way, I'm interested in the person. Oh, I think it was you, Lisa, who said you had had an evaluation and they told you you were average or normal or something. My husband began to develop what he and I and our kids recognized as symptoms of cognitive decline at least 16 or 18 years before he died. And he had 4 or 5 neuropsych evaluations at Kaiser. Everyone ended with the examiner telling him that he was, at the top end of his age group, which really wasn't a comfort because he was losing functions. I think the problem is, and Lisa, you may be able to take this as a compliment. What we think is that people who are really smart to begin with, have a lot of education, have to decline really significantly before those tests will pick up a diagnosis. And I think that was the case with my husband. But finally, they did give him a diagnosis of some pre-Alzheimer. They didn't call it MCI. They didn't, I forget what the actual name was. But at that point, he decided he wanted to make a plan. And we've always been planners. So we then needed to consider our options. Like most Californians, we knew there was a law. We hadn't really read the fine print. Well, the fine print tells you that unless you have a terminal diagnosis with a prognosis of less than 6 months to live, you cannot access medical aid in dying. And that is the same for every jurisdiction in the US that has a law, because every state's law is based on the original Oregon model, which was passed in the 1990s. Okay. So that ruled out a legal death in California. And we had a kid who had lived in Mexico. She said, well, I could go to Mexico and I know people, I could bring in drugs. And we said, thank you very much, but we're not going to have you smuggling drugs into California and be worrying about you getting arrested. We have enough on our plate right now. So we ended up deciding to go to Switzerland, which is the only country that will provide an assisted death for a non-citizen. There are numerous countries that have laws much more progressive than the US that will provide an assisted death for people with dementia, for people with unrelenting pain syndromes. But Switzerland is the only one that will accept a non-citizen. So we set a date about 6 months ahead. We set a date on May 1st and said we would like a date on October 1st. And we worked with a clinic in Switzerland called Pegasus. There are a couple of clinics there. And we had a 6-month process of my husband saying goodbye to people. It was pretty intense. It was very valuable for him and for everybody else. I remember saying to him, you're hearing people say the things to you that are generally only said at funerals, and then the dead person doesn't have a chance to hear them. It was really an important time. We went to Pegasus with our 2 daughters and their partners. We were all with my husband. He died surrounded by his family, listening to a Bach cello suite, which was his favorite music. And he died with an IV infusion, which was quick and painless. I think he went out in under 2 minutes. The morning of his death, the director of Pegasus asked him if he would be willing to do a little video interview. And he said yes. So I'm going to read you a little piece of what he said in that interview. He said, I firmly believe that this is a right that every human has to determine when and how to leave this life. I'm not committing suicide. I am committing to live my life to its very, very end with the same kind of values I've tried to exercise throughout my life. I hope that there will come a day when dying will be treated like any other human experience rather than something that has to be avoided at all costs. It cannot be avoided because we all are destined to die. The issue is how we die and with what kind of values. It was pretty articulate for a guy with early dementia. So I came back from Switzerland thinking about how crazy it seemed to me that a person in California should have to fly across an ocean to obtain something that I felt really should be our legal right here at home. And I started to, wonder what could I do about it? What else was out there? I did a web search of what organizations there, end of life organizations. And one of them that I found was the Hemlock Society of San Diego, which is the only remaining Hemlock Society chapter in the US. And I could tell from their website that they're very progressive. They were sort of on the same page. They do a lot of education. So I decided to join Hemlock. And a few months later, I was invited to a Zoom for new members. And in the course of that, we went around the way you did, introduced ourselves. Why did we join Hemlock? And I mentioned that I had gone to Pegasus with my husband. And in the chat, a message popped up saying, we have to talk. I was at Pegasus with my mom a few months before you. And this woman and I began to talk. That was the genesis. We got together with a couple of other people and formed a better exit. Her mom had Alzheimer's. So we became a group of 4. And we got some advice from other people we knew, people with experience in law, legislation, communication, healthcare. We needed to decide what we wanted to do, but we also needed to form an organization, which is quite a bit of work. You know, we needed a website, a name, a bank account. We needed to register with the state. We started talking about the changes we would like to see. As we saw it, the biggest problem with the law in the United States, and of course in California, is this arbitrary 6-month requirement. What it means is that most of the people that can use the legal medications to end their lives have cancer, because those people, in some sense, are already dying. You know, and I think it was one of the reasons that arbitrary timeline is in place is it makes it easier for doctors and makes them more comfortable about being involved in the idea of helping people end their lives. So we certainly were concerned about people with dementia, because no person with dementia will ever access the law. By the time they're anywhere close to 6 months from death, they're not making any choices. They're not choosing what to have for breakfast, let alone being able to articulate, yes, I want to end my life. This isn't a life I want to continue having. So that was a big issue for us. But the other was people that have other progressive neurological conditions. There are people, for instance, with ALS, who by the time they reach that 6-month marker have lost so much motor coordination and strength that they cannot lift a cup. And part of the law is that you have to self-administer the medication. Somebody else can mix the medication, but you 100%, the person who's dying has to self-administer without any help. And the other group we were interested in helping are people with unrelenting pain syndromes of various kinds. As somebody pointed out so cogently, there are situations where nothing helps pain, and chronic pain is a really terrible thing to live with. So we considered several routes. What we knew we wanted to expand California's law. And in addition to redefining who could qualify to use the law, the other thing we wanted to talk about was how the medication is administered. In the US, you have to drink a very thick, apparently terrible tasting concoction. Nobody who's alive has ever tried it, of course, but all the reports from people who are drinking it is that it tastes terrible. It's very caustic. It can burn the esophagus. And as hard as clinicians have tried, they really have not found a good solution around that. And that's a very sad thing. I mean, the last thing you ingest is something that tastes terrible and makes you miserable. The only other possibility, because some people have particularly certain cancers that affect their ability to swallow or take anything in by mouth, the medication can be introduced through a rectal catheter, but the person still would have to have enough strength in their hands to push a plunger to get this medication into their system. And what we would like to see is the kind of intravenous administration that my husband was able to use at Pegasus. The way that worked is that a medical professional put an IV into his wrist attached to a saline drip. When he was ready, he moved a little dial, which released the lethal medications. And as I said, it was completely painless and quick. And they also have workarounds where if somebody can't use their hands, they have other ways. It's such a simple device to operate that there are other ways people can open that valve. So we started to talk about how we might possibly achieve this. one route could have been a court challenge. We could say have a plaintiff, somebody with early dementia, somebody with a pain syndrome that couldn't be addressed by, current medical science, and say, I've been discriminated against because I need to access the law and I can't do it. The problem with a court challenge is that it's extremely expensive. We're a tiny shoestring organization, and we didn't have the kind of money that it would take. This would be a novel kind of case. You'd need very experienced attorneys, and it would be, hugely expensive. The second thing we considered was the possibility of a ballot initiative. For those of you who live in California, you know that our ballots are often loaded down with ballot initiatives. Again, it's very, very expensive because you have to have thousands and thousands and thousands of signatures, and people generally pay other people, organizations pay people to gather those signatures. It wasn't something we could afford. And it would have, any ballot initiative would have generated, a lot of opposition from the groups that do tend to oppose this legislation. And I'll talk more about that later. So we decided that we would go the legislative route. It's not easy. The first thing you have to do is find a legislator who is willing to author a piece of legislation. And they get hundreds of requests every year from constituents asking them, please write a bill on this topic or that topic. So we spent about a year talking to legislative staffers in both the state Senate and the Assembly, trying to find an author. Frankly, we didn't know if we'd ever find an author. I mean, you could spend years and not get a legislator willing to expend political capital on your issue. But last January, we found out that we had a state senator who was willing to author a bill. This was a big deal for us. Her name is Catherine Blakespear. She's down in Orange County. She's a Democrat. She's fairly new to the state Senate. She is an estate attorney, and she had a lot of experience talking to people about end-of-life issues and wishes and so forth. So we were thrilled that she came on board. The bill, which was Senate Bill 1196, really contained everything we wanted in it. It had a broad definition of who would qualify, because we said that 6-month language should be just taken out of the law. And we said, as Lisa read, that anyone who was experiencing suffering that couldn't be addressed, and that chose that suffering that in the person's own judgment made their life such that they would prefer to end it, that they should have the right to apply for access for the law. In terms of dementia, we said that the person should be evaluated by 2 professionals to make sure that they were, rational and in control of their cognitive faculties enough to make the decision. And I will say, by the way, parenthetically, that is one very difficult aspect of a chosen death with dementia. Even in Switzerland, a person with dementia has to be early enough in the disease so that they can clearly make the choice and not be seen to be influenced by somebody else. And that really presents a challenge for the person with early dementia, because it means that the choice has to be made at a time when they can still really enjoy quite a bit of their life. In the last month of his life, my husband often said, "I don't want to die." That didn't mean he didn't intend to go through with it. It simply meant that he wished he could have waited longer. So we would love to see an advance directive where you could say, here are my personal criteria when I can't recognize my family members, when I can't feed myself, when I can't care for myself, whatever the personal, line in the sand would be for somebody, then I want my life to be ended. We're nowhere close to getting something like that approved in the US, unfortunately, because that then would mean that the person can't self-administer. So that would be euthanasia. In other words, someone else administering the lethal medications. And we just felt that that was pretty much a third rail at this point. So it's not something we included in the bill. So what happened to SB 1196? It was scheduled for a hearing in the Senate Health Committee. And this is where such a bill would always start, whether it's the Assembly or the Senate, it would start in the Health Committee. We actually had witnesses lined up that would have been very powerful witnesses. And we were planning to have what's called a testimony-only hearing because we knew that the bill did not have enough yes votes in that committee to pass out of the committee. And the senator did not want a no vote recorded. That was also the advice we got from one of our advisors, who was actually a great advocate who used to be in the state assembly, and she was the first person that ever introduced an end-of-life bill in California. Her bill didn't make it. That was in 1999, but she too said you don't want a no vote. So we were planning to go ahead with this testimony only hearing when in fact we were told that we could not do that, that there would have to be a vote or no hearing. So the senator withdrew the bill from consideration. The good news is she's going to resubmit a bill in the next session, which means next spring. The question is going to be how that bill will be rewritten, because it did get quite a lot of press, which was great to get this issue out there, but it also got quite a lot of opposition. So I want to tell you a little bit about the opposition. There are certain groups that have always opposed end-of-life legislation. These, the most important ones are groups affiliated with the Catholic Church. There are a lot of health organizations that are actually under the umbrella of the Catholic Church, or affiliated with the church. And certain disability groups who have the concern that people with disabilities might be coerced into ending their life. These groups have sued every time there has been legislation, but they have not, as far as we know, they have not actually been able to prevent passage of these laws. As far as SB 1196, we think that the most powerful opposition that really scuttled the bill for the first time around was from two groups, one of them quite surprising. One was the California Medical Association. That was not particularly surprising. The California Medical Association is known to be a fairly conservative and cautious group. And I think they were, in fact, both groups that I'm going to talk about submitted formal letters of opposition. That's what they're required to do in order to legally lobby against the bill, which they did. And the California Medical Association said that their problem with the bill was that it, quote, fundamentally alters the current law by decoupling eligibility for the medication from being near the end of one's life, and is a program more akin to euthanasia. Well, they were quite right that our whole goal was to decouple eligibility from that 6-month requirement. But there is not one word about euthanasia, and there's nothing remotely resembling euthanasia in the bill. So we're not sure where that came from. The other group that opposed us, and many people were surprised to hear this, was the group called Compassion and Choices. They are the best funded and largest, most powerful end-of-life organization in the US. They have attorneys, they have lobbyists, they have all the accoutrements of a big wealthy organization that a Better Exit doesn't have. And they oppose the bill because they think it's too soon to expand the law. Their goal is to have the same law, the same Oregon model, approved in many, many more states before they agree that we should talk about expanding the law. Right now, there are 10 states and the District of Columbia that have a law. So that's 11 jurisdictions. We have 50 states. It's a very slow process. We know that no red state will ever approve an end-of-life law. So our feeling is that the idea that we should wait for decades to then talk about expanding the law is just really kind of crazy, because we have thousands of people suffering from conditions that might cause them to want to end their life. The state of California, the Department of Health of the state of California estimates that by 2040, there will be more than 2.1 million people living with dementia in California, and that may actually be an underestimate. So Compassion and Choices oppose the bill, and they are quite powerful. Most of the people that contribute to them, and by the way, my husband and I contributed to them for years, have no idea that they would take this kind of a position, because all of their the information on their website and the webinars they do, it has to do with supporting people's choices at the end of life. But they're drawing a line that we feel really is very limiting. They say that they have end of life planning tools, but that involves an advanced directive that you can say, if you're in advanced dementia and you develop, say, a pneumonia, you can say, in that case, don't treat me. Well, you might have dementia and be in really bad shape for 10 years before you develop a pneumonia, or you might never develop it. Somebody mentioned that her mom was happy with dementia, and that happens, but many people are not happy. We frequently get calls from people telling us their stories, and one of them really was so sad. A woman who said to me that for the last 3 or 4 years of her mom's life, she either was crying or screaming, and there was very little they could do. It was terrible for the mom, and of course terrible for her daughter, who was her caregiver. So there's no guarantee for any of us whether we'd be, a placid person with dementia or an angry or anxious person with dementia. Personally, my plan B, until we can change the law, will be having enough in my bank account to know that I can get to Switzerland if I need to. So let's see. So our situation at this point is the question of whether we can find some ways to neutralize the opposition to the reforms that we want to make. We're not exactly sure what the senator has in mind in terms of the next bill she will author. It's certainly possible that it's going to be less expansive than what we wanted to do with SB 1196. By the way, the language that we used, which uses the phrase irremediable suffering, is language that we took from the Canadian law. Canada has had a law since 2016, and the criterion for access to an assisted death in Canada is to be suffering from an irremediable condition. So that's very broad. It can be dementia, it can be pain, it can be a progressive neurological problem, it can be anything that the person decides that she doesn't want to live with anymore, basically. So we very specifically use that language, and that language got us into a lot of hot water because that's what the CMA was objecting to, and some other people who said, oh, this is too vague, this is too broad, it opens the door to anybody, which wouldn't be true because people would still have to go through the application process that exists now. So, I mean, we weren't saying that the California law should be thrown out. We were saying it should be expanded. And by the way, it's not a slam dunk. I mean, even if you're a person with a terminal cancer diagnosis, it's a lot of paperwork. If there are a lot of steps to go through, you don't just walk in and say, I want to do this, and they say, fine, here's a prescription. It doesn't work that way. And it wouldn't have worked that way under SB 1196 either. So one of the things the senator is talking about doing, and I hope she will in the fall, is establishing a working group where they would invite stakeholders, which would be us. We were the sponsoring organization for the bill, and we will be the sponsoring organization for her next bill. She would invite Compassion and Choices. She would invite people from the California Medical Association, people from some disability organizations, and see if we can find some common ground. It's entirely possible that because she'll probably need to not use that very broad definition of irremediable, grievous and irremediable condition, which is the Canadian language, it's possible that the next bill will not include everybody that we want to include. I think probably it's possible that we would have more success if she did a bill that focused mainly on dementia and then perhaps later went back to deal with some other issues. But all of that really is speculation at this point. Bills are not submitted until February. So we're ahead of where we were last time, because the last time around, we only got our author in January. Here we are in August. We know who our author is, and we know what the challenge is. We are planning to do a couple of things. We're going to have a Zoom group of doctors that do have patients that use the legal law, talk to them about whatever ideas they have about how the language could be revised to still get as much as possible of what we want. And we're also going to do a Zoom group of nurses that have experience in this area in palliative care or in end-of-life issues. So we'll see what we can come up with, and hopefully the senator will rethink where we can go with the next bill. But we're pretty stubborn and we're not going anywhere. So as you know, we're quite aware that this may take a number of years. With big controversial bills, sometimes they have to be submitted and resubmitted many times until there's enough support in the legislature to get them passed. So maybe I'll stop with that and see what else you folks want to talk about.
So we'll take some questions, and I just have a couple. I just donated while you were talking, so, and I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
And I actually was at a film that was made about the California guy whose two daughters made well, the one of the daughters made about him, and where he chose the method of medical assisted dying.
Was it Last Flight Home?
Last Flight Home.
Yeah.
And Compassion and Care was there, and I asked them specifically about dementia, and they didn't answer it, and they skirted the issue. Thankfully, Karen, who's not here, who's actually is been doing a lot of research on the Switzerland issue option for her partner who has dementia, had gotten me in touch with you all. And I did, after the bill was turned down, I did write Compassion and Care and told them that I was very upset that they weren't supporting it. I think I did. I need to check because I never heard back from them, which I thought was unusual. So I might contact them again, but I would love to get more involved. And I guess two things I would want to know is A, how can I get more involved, but also B, have you talked directly with Compassion and Care? And
Yes.
and
It was very interesting. We met with them early in our process before we had an author. We met with their Southwest Regional Director, and she said personally she was very much in favor of what we wanted to do. She said, of course, I can't talk for the organization. We said, we understand that. Would you go to the organization? What we were asking was not for them to support us, but would they remain neutral? If they had agreed to remain neutral, it would have been a big win for us. We never heard back from her, even though we attempted to follow up. After we had the senator, we had another meeting with them. And at that point, they were very willing to meet with us because we now were a player and a thorn in their side, potentially. So we met with the same person, and their lobbyist was there, their California lobbyist. Again, very friendly meeting. They tried to persuade us that it was too early to do this, that we should spend years doing public education and so forth. They also indicated to the senator's office that they would not submit a letter of opposition, and then they proceeded to do just that without the courtesy of letting the office know that they were going to do it. We sent out an email to our supporters, our Better Exit supporters, because they wanted to know why the bill had been pulled. And we put on that email the letters of opposition, both from Compassion and Choices and the California Medical Association. And a number of people wrote to us and said, I've just contacted them and I said they're out of my will and I'm never giving them another penny. And so they've certainly gotten some flack. And the problem is, they have thousands and thousands of supporters who have no idea that they are opposing expanding access. So hopefully the word will get out. What people can do, and I should have said this earlier, is go to our website, which is abetterexit.org. And there's a place on there that says, become a supporter, get our newsletter or something. And that puts you onto our mailing list. And then when we've got news or things people can do, places people can write, you'll get an email. We did have, before the hearing that didn't happen, we had a lot of our people write letters. And we actually, what happens when people sign up onto our website, they have to answer a question, are you in support of what we're doing? And that allows us to do something we did before the bill was going to be heard, which is basically to submit the list of supporters, which is now around 700 on our website. So it's very useful to us to have as many people listed as supporters as we can.
Okay, great. I had a follow-up, but I'll wait. And Naj, you have your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah. Well, just from what you just said, only California residents or
no,
helpful?
To our surprise, actually, the senator's legislative director said we can have letters of support from anywhere in the US, in fact, out of the US. So anybody in the US is welcome to sign on as a supporter, and we welcome you. I mean, you know, that would be great.
Right.
One of our thoughts in terms of strategy, Nudge, is California has been more progressive in certain respects with respect to passing legislation than other states, for instance, environmental legislation and so forth. And our hope is that if we can get a change to the law in California, there will be a domino effect and other, because the states watch what other states are doing. We already have an example of that. A couple of years ago, the state of Oregon was sued on their residency requirement for using medical aid in dying. There was a doctor whose practice was very close to the border with the state of Washington. So he had patients both in Oregon and Washington, and he had a patient in Washington state that wanted and qualified for medical aid in dying, but he couldn't be the treating doctor because the guy didn't live in Oregon. So the guy sued. The state of Oregon settled, and their legislature changed their law. After they did that, the state of Vermont changed their law to remove the residency requirement. So yes, we're starting in California, but our hope is that this isn't something that would just stay in California.
So I really had my hand up to ask if you could, so you said California, Vermont, and Oregon, if you could list the other 7 states.
Oh gosh, let's see. California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, New Mexico, Vermont. I'm going to leave some out. District of Columbia. There's 10 states. You can Google it. I should have it at my fingertips, but I don't. 10 states and the District of Columbia, which isn't a state. So it's 11 jurisdictions. New Mexico is the most recent. Several other states have bills in process. New Hampshire does, several others. But again, you know, just as with our bill, even on the more restrictive bill, they often have to submit it several times, several years before it'll pass. And that's another reason why we think it's just crazy to wait, you know, wait till, I don't know, 25 or 30 states. I mean, that won't be in our lifetime if we're waiting for that.
Any other questions? Laura, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am utterly impressed by what you're doing.
Thank you.
And your cohorts and the organization. Your presentation has been so eloquent. And there's one question that came up that I'm surprised at myself that it came up.
Mhm.
And that is, can you expand to include mental illness?
That's a question that we've often been asked. And, you know, it's interesting. Very few countries will provide an assisted death for mental illness. The Netherlands will. I think it's thorny, it's difficult. And the reason it's difficult is the question of whether the condition is treatable. Now, I do know that Pegasus, and in fact, the director of Pegasus told me about one applicant who, he was a guy, I think, in his 50s and was miserable and felt he could never develop a relationship. He wanted to end his life. And they referred him to a therapist. The guy did not end his life. You know, his life got better enough that he felt okay about it. I think it's within the realm of possibility, but I don't think it's something we could propose at this point because it is so much more difficult to assess whether the condition is irremediable. I think I think we can easily say that people with, severe mental problems are having grievous situations. Whether it's irremediable is the question.
As a psychologist, I mean, there are people, I guess, with schizophrenia and bipolar and all sorts of demonstrable, these are clear disease patterns.
Right.
It's not just because the relationship went bad, but they're dealing with and yet does the person with those kinds of severe mental illnesses have the cognitive ability to make that decision so that covered by the law? Yes, I'm tired of being treated for this schizophrenia. I don't want to do this anymore. It alters me. And I see several problems there, but yet people are suffering.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. I think an even clearer example is there are people with certain unrelenting depressions that don't respond to any medication, don't respond to electroconvulsive treatment. And that's a situation where sometimes just nothing works. And so there's where I can see if somebody could demonstrate, okay, I've tried this, I've tried every known treatment and it doesn't work and I'm really done. Personally, I think that person absolutely should have the right to make the choice. I think other areas are a little more difficult because it could be that, some one drug doesn't work for somebody with a psychosis and something else will, so it's a really difficult area.
Ruth.
Thank you. A few years ago, a couple I know, lesbian couple, one of them was diagnosed with early Alzheimer's, and she decided, as some people do, that there was no way she was going to live with that future. And so she chose a very violent death. And she shot herself in the backyard. And her wife found the remains. And if anybody's ever, I've been in a situation where I've seen the remains of somebody who did that, and it's horrific.
Yeah.
It is. So would people who have survived that and have seen the utter pain of somebody having that kind of diagnosis, would it help our cause, which I side with you, I just made a donation also.
Thank you.
To speak up about how awful it is for people who are left.
Yeah, absolutely. There isn't really a way to get good numbers. We don't know how many people take their lives in really, really miserable ways, both for them and for their survivors. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to find somebody, who shot themselves. We don't know how many people do that. By the way, there is only one legal way in the US that if you don't qualify for medical aid in dying, you can end your life, which is called VSED, voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. We actually very briefly considered that when we were discussing the options for my husband, and he probably had the willpower to do it. I didn't think I could take it, frankly. I think it's just a very miserable and kind of cruel thing that a person legally can starve themselves to death. It really is the thirst that's the worst part of it from all reports, because after a couple of days, a person isn't feeling hunger, but the thirst is terrible. And if you give them any water, then it sets the clock back. So people are usually sedated, but in a person that is relatively healthy physically, this can take weeks and not days. And my husband was pretty healthy, and we just decided this was not an appealing option, that it really needed to be something easier than that.
I just want to insert something. We had a speaker from Final Exit
Yes.
who claimed that their techniques are absolutely legal. Absolutely, because it's not suicide. The person is putting the hood on themselves. They're, she said it's absolutely legal.
I'm not sure if that's true. Final Exit Network is a really excellent organization. If you're not familiar with it, they, they provide people that will educate and advise people, and their method is a hood with an inert gas. They're using nitrogen, and apparently that's quick and effective. We actually didn't know about that method when we made the decision to go to Switzerland. I'm not sure my husband would have chosen it, because I think, given that the person has to do it, him or herself, I think he might have been anxious about doing it right, but as far as I know, I think there have been some prosecutions, but I don't think any of them have succeeded. By the way, at least in the state of California, if you help someone in their life, that is a felony and it is prosecuted. I did check that out because we briefly considered trying to do something at home and, discarded that idea.
Okay, Meryl, then
Yeah, this was an amazing presentation, Miss Marcia. Thank you so much. It was just clear and simple and chock full of information. And I wanted to know about the recording, that it was recorded, and if it's possible to share the recording of your talk with friends individually, but not over any kind of mass media, which I don't have anyway. But I'd love a couple of my friends to be able to see that and hear you speak.
I would absolutely.
Oh, that would be great. And how? How does one get access to the recording?
I'm going to put it on YouTube, and I'll send everybody the link. A private room in YouTube.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And then my other question is, how does a person make a donation if they can't do it on the computer but would like to send a check?
If you go to the website, there will be a mailing address. Or the mailing address is in Cardiff, California, down south.
Great, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
So I just wanted to ask you if you mentioned about the inert gas. I was mentioning, I've been talking about ways to take my life with my friends for years. And one of my friends said, oh, that gas is really hard to get. You have to be a welder to be able to get that.
I don't think it's hard to get, and that's something Final Exit Network could tell you. They used to use helium, but it's no longer available in the pure enough form to use, and that's why they're using nitrogen. What I've heard is that it's not that hard to get, but they really know about that because that's what they're educating people about.
So the what I've come up with for myself is insulin. It's pretty easy to get because I know zillions of people who have insulin, and I think it's pretty quick and painless.
I don't know anything about using insulin. What I will say is that, you hear a lot of people saying, oh, I've saved pills, which I think is not a good plan. We did have a FaceTime with a family physician who was the sister of a good friend of one of my kids. And her advice was, don't try this using saved up medication. As she said, a failed attempt could be a lot worse than no attempt, because you could end up in a vegetative state in a nursing home, exactly what you're trying to avoid in the first place, right? So I think it's important, if you're going to do it on your own, to make sure that you have a plan that is really going to work and not leave you compromised.
So I have a question. Would it be helpful if we, and then I'll get to you, Ruth. I didn't see your head.
Okay.
would it be helpful for us to talk to our doctors to try to get them to support Better Exit?
Absolutely. It would be helpful for anybody to talk to anybody who might be able to have any influence. I think, here's an interesting kind of side story. We're Kaiser members, and my husband and I had the same primary doctor. But what we didn't know, first of all, he is Korean American. We thought very likely he's Roman Catholic. We didn't know what his opinion would be, and we didn't know whether he might have a duty to warn. That's duty to warn is technical language for anybody who's a teacher or a therapist or in any kind of helping profession. There are certain triggers which mean you have to warn that somebody's going to harm themselves. So we wrestled with this a little bit, and we decided not to tell him. And what my husband did was to write him a note, and I said, when I come back from Switzerland, I'll make an appointment and hand it to him so that it doesn't go through the, Kaiser email, so that he'll know. And I did that, and this very reserved guy got up and threw his arms around me and said, "Oh, I'm totally supportive." He said I wouldn't have had to report it. He said the only thing I would have wanted to make sure was whether it was a rational decision. And I said, well, it was, So now that's just him. I don't know how other doctors would react. So I have a friend who's a retired Kaiser doc who's very much supportive of what we're doing, but he said, I don't think I could bring myself to participate in it. We consider helping somebody end their life part of medical care. But doctors are so, their training, I think, is so focused on preserving life no matter what, that they have a hard time making that leap to the idea that what's in a patient's best interest might be to end their life and not to prolong it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ruth.
Couple of things. I live in the Coachella Valley, and there are no doctors in our area who will even use the current California law.
Wow.
Get them to do that. Some of them will refer out of our area, but there's nobody in our location that is going to even use that. So there's a lot of us that are campaigning with the physicians. I've been reluctant to even ask the doctor that I go to, because he's part of this system that is opposed to this, to any sort of medical aid in dying. It's really, it's rough. But
that's a serious problem.
It is a very serious problem. Now, I know a few people locally who have been able to find doctors out of our area that have helped them, but it's difficult traveling. It's also, for people that are very sick.
Right.
It's just very difficult.
Terrible. Are you familiar with an organization called the American Clinicians Association for Medical Aid in Dying? The acronym is ACAMAID. It was started by a Berkeley doctor named Lonnie Shabelson, he's now retired, but his entire practice, once the law went into effect in 2016, was working with patients using medical aid in dying. But he has started this organization, which is to recruit and train physicians and nurses, medical people. And I would suggest contacting him, because there may be individual practitioners in your area that are willing, if there are, he's likely to know about them.
Yeah. Because I'm active in our community, and people come and ask me all kinds of weird questions. So
yeah, right.
To share,
well, it would be worth seeing if he has any leads. That's really a problem, because for instance, where I am in the Bay Area, Kaiser is very cooperative. They work with the law and so forth, but it's really, it's a problem if you don't have access.
Also, the question about the system of using nitrogen, which we had a presentation on. Uh, And it was proposed that it was very painless and very easy, et cetera, et cetera. But then I read about the execution, I think it was in Alabama, where they used nitrogen for the first time. And it sounded as if it went all that well.
No, but there was a problem with that, and I read about that also. They used some kind of a face mask, which was not well fitted. And that's the flaw. The problem with executions, in addition to the fact that they're killing people in the name of the state, is that the people carrying out these executions are often not very well trained. Probably
Most
not.
of them not medical, most of them not medical people, period.
Right. But clearly that was the problem with that attempt to use nitrogen. You have to do it properly if you're going to do it,
I read that he had convulsions and
Yes, of course. It was terrible.
I asked her during that presentation, what about that? And she said they didn't know how to do it. And also the person didn't want it done.
Of course, that's another big issue.
Yeah, that does make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the struggling or whatever,
Also, I have a personal kind of an aversion to the thought of using gas because of having Jewish heritage.
Yes, right. Well, listen, my family is Jewish, and when we talked about VSED, I said, listen, we are not going to starve people to death. Food is one of our great pleasures.
It's true. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Oh, thank you.
And one of the things that I have been campaigning for also with our law is for the use of either IV or IM medication, because if you want to do this with friends, doing it rectally isn't going to work. I personally could never eat applesauce that tasted that god awful.
Right.
But people do. I mean,
people manage to do it, but it certainly is not a pleasant last thing,
you said that they weren't going to be using it for people who have ALS. I have a friend who had ALS that was able to.
Yes. There was a very interesting court case a couple of years ago. A woman with ALS sued the state. I think Lonnie Shavelson was one of the plaintiffs on that case. And what the case said, that the California law was in conflict with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which provides assistance, all kinds of assistance that people with disabilities need. And she said, if I wait until I'm 6 months from dying, I will have lost the use of my hands and I won't be able to do this. What she was asking was if she initiated the action, for somebody else to help her lift the cup to her mouth. The judge threw that case out and said that the law as written didn't permit that. So she did die before she wanted to. I think they now have another plaintiff, and the case will be reheard. But that's the problem with certain progressive neurological difficulties that will then prevent the person who actually qualifies from the law from being able to use it.
Yeah. I don't know. She was also in the Bay Area, but was able.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Marcia, did that court case did the judge, and then I'll get to you, Meryl, address the issue of the ADA at all, or just?
I'm trying to remember the details. I'm not sure whether he did. It was, he basically said the California law takes precedence and it doesn't allow that,
Meryl.
Yeah, I have two questions. One was about the interfacing or interaction with death doulas out there in California. And then my other question is, what kind of risk, in fact, happens with medical workers who make available overdose drugs with warnings, don't use more than this much. And then so people can choose to use more than that much if they want to. Because I have a couple of friends that went that way.
I see. That's interesting. Yeah. Death doulas are great. They're in California. There are quite a number of them. And I think they're very, very helpful to people. One of the great ironies, picking up on what you're talking about, is that hospice nurses and doctors routinely overdose people with morphine and take them out, or suggest that the family do it. I have a dear friend whose husband was dying of pancreatic cancer, and she was on the phone with the doctor, and he said, just keep giving him more morphine. It's done all the time with hospice patients, and nobody raises an eyebrow. As for overdosing on medications, I'm sure it happens, probably more than we know about.
Yeah.
We did that with my ex's, well, she wasn't my ex then, mother, and she was in so much pain prior to giving her another dosage of morphine, but when we gave her the extra dose of morphine, she died very quickly and very seemingly painlessly. But
yeah, it's apparently a pretty good way. I think it depresses breathing and it will end life pretty quickly. The problem is that people that aren't on hospice don't have access to it.
Okay, I won't go on. But I think we're about out of time. Does anybody else have another question before we? Okay. Oh, well, thank you so much, Marcia. This was really helpful. And I hope that the next time it's introduced, that you can call on us to support you.
Okay.
Yes.
And you're going to put in the chat how to get the recording, right?
I'm going to send an email when the
Oh,
recording.
an email. Okay.
And maybe you could let everybody know our URL if they want to go on and become a supporter. That would be great. Thanks to all of you. You were a great group. Your questions and comments were really great. And
yeah, great idea. I'll put the URL for A Better Exit in the email with the video.
Great. Thanks you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
And we have 5 more minutes if anybody wants to say anything else that they want to just comment on.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for doing this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tam, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting angle, dealing with some part of the disability community that says we have assistance for everything else. Why not have assistance for this? That might be a really strong legal argument.
That's right. By the way, I should have mentioned, there are a number of people in the disability community that are very, very supportive of what we're doing.
Sure.
One of them is a retired attorney who's a quadriplegic due to an accident when she was young. She's very active in a major disability organization in the Bay Area and has said to them, I know some of you don't agree with me, but I, for instance, she's given them large contributions. She said, I do not want my contribution ever to be used to challenge this kind of law, because she's had friends who've had to end their lives in terrible ways,
Yeah.
So it's thorny, but we're moving ahead.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because I consider myself part of the disability community, but I have really parted ways on their position of the organizations. Generally, I don't think they represent the disability community accurately or entirely. So I agree with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Marcia.
Bye-bye.
See you all in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. This was great.
Thanks, Lisa.